Hi class, it's Dr. Lindner. Welcome to Anatomy and Physiology 1. In this video, we're going to get into some basics of anatomy and physiology. And you can see on this first slide, why don't we try to define what anatomy is and then try and figure out what is physiology? Because after all, you will be taking AMP1 and AMP2. When we talk about anatomy, what we mean by that is we're focusing on human structure. And the way something is structured helps to determine how something functions, right? For example, if you were to look at your elbow joint and flex and extend your elbow and then move your shoulder joint, you'll notice that they can move in very different directions. The reason why they can move in very different directions is because the structure of the elbow is very, very different than the structure of the shoulder. And structure is going to determine function. So anatomy is the study of structure, whereas physiology is the study of function. Structure determines function. When we look at anatomy a little bit further, we can examine anatomy both macroscopically, right, with the naked eye, or we can look at it microscopically, which means we can't see it with the naked eye. We need to use a microscope to see it. So we can look at cells, we can look at molecules. These are all things that you can't see with the naked human eye. We need equipment that can magnify it to see it. So when we're studying cells, we call that cytology. This, CYT, cyte equals cell. So as you're studying, you may see something called a hepatocyte. And then you would look at the word and go, all right, this means cell. Well, what type of cell? Hepato. Then you'd have to look at some medical terminology and say, well, I've heard of hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. So HEPA, right? This is hepato is liver. So a liver cell. What if we see something called an osteocyte? Well, again, here we're seeing cyte, CYT, and then osteo refers to bone. So now we're looking at a bone cell. Now when cells come together, they make tissues. And histology is the study of tissues. So let's take a look at this. I just said when cells come together, they make tissues. So here's cells. Cells come together, they're going to make tissues. Well, let's see what makes up cells. Let's go back to number one first. So we start here at the chemical level. Chemistry. Oh gosh, chemistry. I hate chemistry. I didn't like Chem 1, Chem 2, inorganic chemistry, organic chemistry. But really, if we look at biochemistry, I think of chemistry as such important building blocks to the human body. But for me, I try and make it really relevant, especially to those that are getting into healthcare. We could look at chemistry, learn some of the basics to it, like carbohydrates and fats and proteins, because, right, we're talking about nutrition. Nutrition is really chemistry. So we know that some people can consume high protein diet, some people can consume high fat diet. We know some people can consume high carbs, or some people are very sensitive to carbs and have to stay away from that, right? We each have a different um, biochemical individuality. Each of ours is a little bit different, biochemical individuality. So chemicals, whether we're talking about carbon, hydrogens, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, right? The way we organize these things the way we organize carbons and hydrogens and nitrogens and oxygens, well, the structure of that, the way it's structured, is what differentiates a carbohydrate from a protein or a protein from a fat. Again, structure determines function. A carbohydrate functions differently than a fat. A fat functions differently than a protein. So chemicals and chemistry is really, really important because in week one, this very first week, when you start reading up on a cell, you will learn that, okay, we have a cell that has a nucleus and then it has a cell membrane. And the cell membrane that you will learn is what they refer to as a phospholipid bilayer. A phospholipid bilayer. Phospho, phosphates, lipids, fats, a phospholipid bilayer. But in this membrane, there's going to be carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and cholesterol, right? We have all of these different things that make up a cell. So when people say, I'm on a no fat diet, or I'm eliminating carbohydrates completely from my diet, I'm only going to consume fat and protein and remove all the carbohydrates, you're damaging the cells because they need carbohydrates. Maybe not 300 grams a day, right? We have limits. So if you mess up the integrity, the structural integrity of a cell, right? Because you're playing around with your biochemistry. So if your chemistry is off, then the cell is off. And when cells come together, they make tissues. And we will spend a week talking about tissues. We'll talk about that next week. And there's four types of tissues, four types. We have, I'm going to abbreviate them. There's epithelial tissue. There's connective tissue. So we have epithelial tissue, connective tissue. We have muscle tissue. We have muscle. And then we have nerve tissue. So we have four major categories of tissues. We have epithelium. So much for abbreviating, right? Epithelium, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nerve tissue. So when these tissues come together, they're going to create organs. And when organs come together, in this case here, we're looking at the stomach. And when organs come together that work in harmony, like the esophagus and the stomach and the small intestine and the large intestine and the liver and the gallbladder, right? All of these come together, all of these organs that work in harmony. Now it's going to create a system. It's just this particular system is referred to as the digestive system. Digestive system will cover in anatomy and physiology too. But we have 11 systems in the body, like the reproductive system, the immune system, the cardiovascular system, the integumentary system, the endocrine system, the neural system, reproductive, respiratory, urinary system. We have all these systems, and when all these systems come together, we get the crowning creation of all, called the organism. So chemicals come together to make cells, cells come together to make tissues, tissues come together to make organs, organs come together to make systems, and then systems come together to make the organism. If your chemistry is off, then your cells can't be truly healthy. They can't be structured well and function well. And if your cells aren't structured well, then what's going to happen to your tissues? They can't be structured and function well. Then the organs can't structure and function well. And then the systems start to malfunction, and then the organism becomes sick. You see how important our biochemistry is? And this starts right from conception, right? When sperm and egg come together and a woman finds out that she's pregnant, what's the very, very first thing? What's the very first thing that a gynecologist is going to tell a woman to start? Now, that doctor is going to say, here's a prescription for folic acid, B9. So that's part of the biochemistry because they know that if you're limited in this chemical or this chemistry of folic acid nutritionally and biochemically, that that's going to impact the mouth because babies can develop a cleft palate. It can impair the nervous system's development. It can affect the neurotransmitters, the endocrine system, depression, migraines. It can result in so many deformities, so many different ailments and imbalances that could have been avoided if we addressed the chemistry. Okay, when I come back, I'm going to take a short break here. When we come back, we'll talk about these systems that I mentioned here, some of these systems. Okay, let's see if anyone has any questions.